This week, we're rebroadcasting executive interviews from RSA, so we're doing the news first. A slow funding week, only one announcement to discuss. Cyberark acquires Venafi from Thoma Bravo, and we do a deep dive on Thoma Bravo's past and present portfolio. Apparently, only Israeli cybersecurity companies have been exiting for big money over the past year, but why? Some new products, ScarJo versus OpenAI. AI kill switches might be a thing. The latest Gen AI research. Nobody listens to CISOs. A university gives students $10,000 for building an AI tool and then suspends them for building the AI tool. A security chaos tutorial. Then we've got some pre-recorded executive interviews for you from last week's RSA. For our first trio of interviews, Mandy Logan interviews Wendy Yu, CMO at SailPoint, about unifying identity security. Then Jeff Mann interviews Andre Durand, CEO of Ping Identity, about the evolution of identity attack surface. And finally, Ben Carr interviews David Bradbury, CISO at Okta, about eliminating identity threats. For the second group of three executive interviews, Ben Carr interviews Chris Hatter, CISO at Quiet AI, about I don't know. I didn't put that in my notes. Mandy Logan interviews Volkan Erturk, co-founder and CTO at Picus Security. Finally, I interview Maxime Lamoth-Brassard, founder and CEO of Lima Charlie, about using platformization, a word that Tyler loves, to benefit the security industry as a whole. All that and more in this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
On Business Security Weekly, each week we address the challenges facing CISOs through our guest interviews, including former and active CISOs. Our news segment is focused on leadership and communications to better help security leaders translate and communicate security risks into business risks. Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, Tyler Robinson, and others add their expertise to the conversation. I'm Matt Alderman, and I hope you search for Business Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher and subscribe to download our latest content.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy World Turtle Day. This is episode 363, recorded on Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and you may notice this is not my usual recording location. Today is the day before B-Sides Knoxville, and I am at the venue. We are setting up, and I'm taking a moment out to record the podcast from the Mill and Mine in Knoxville, Tennessee, a really cool music venue. Joining me is the Master of Marketing, the Mayor of Mayhem, Tyler Shields. How you doing, Tyler?
Good. It's always such a wonderful introduction being called the Master of Anything, because I don't generally consider myself the Master of anything, but thank you. I'm doing well, Adrian.
And also joining me is the Admiral of AI, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler-Santullo. How you doing, Katie?
I am fine on this Thursday. Congratulations on an almost B-Sides.
Yeah, this is the 10th B-Sides. Last night I checked the numbers and we've sold over 400 tickets. So we could get close to a lot of people buy them the day before, so we could get close to 500 before it's done. But we're prepared. Awesome. We've got one venue that holds 450. That's track 2, and track 1 is a music venue that holds 1,200. So we got room to grow. I'm excited about it. Everything's paid for. Everything's ready. Yeah. All we have to do is show up tomorrow and run the show.
Let the games begin.
Yeah, it's a piece
nothing
of cake.
To that. Yeah.
About noon tomorrow, I'll start relaxing. Like when the keynote goes on, I'll get a bourbon neat and finally start relaxing.
There you go. I love it.
Every year, once about half the show's over and nothing's on fire, I'm like, okay, we got this. All right, some quick announcements here. Get ready for an electrifying experience at the 15th annual Identiverse. We did mention we did a bunch of executive interviews with identity folks, and even more of that coming from CRA with Identiverse. Join 3,000 plus identity professionals at the Aria Resort and Casino in Vegas on May 28th through 31st, 2024, for 4 days packed. Well, that's next week. Packed with dynamic learning and collaboration. Don't miss out on keynote speakers including Danae DeFore, CISO of United Airlines, Tucker Bryant, entrepreneur and former Googler, George Roberts, Director of Identity and Access Engineering at McDonald's, and many more. As a community member, you can receive 25% off your Identiverse 2024 tickets using code IDV24-SW25. Register today at securityweekly.com/IDV2024. And dive into cybersecurity with Cyber Risk Alliance for exclusive insights from RSA Conference 2024. Explore executive interviews with industry leaders, uncovering visionary perspectives on threats and strategies, delve into curated articles on trends and innovations, equipping yourself with essential knowledge for today's cyber landscape. Visit securityweekly.com/RSAC for expert guidance and inspiration in navigating cybersecurity challenges confidently. Now, for the Enterprise Security Weekly news, you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW363. That is the number of today's episode. That's a lot of episodes. You can check out the articles we're going to be talking about there. And so there not a lot of stuff. I think everybody just unloaded their PR cannons for RSA, and they're a bit low in ammunition this week because there's one funding on the list.
Yeah, I saw a couple of micro ones come through, but nothing that was
I
was
left out a
crazy
couple.
interesting.
Yeah,
they were tiny or non consequential.
Yeah, SOC Radar raising 25 million was the only one that I think really fit the bill for what we normally talk about here. So I've got that one as story number one. But yeah, it's pretty standard raise. I assume that's a Series A. But
I guess about the right size.
Yeah.
Series B funding.
Series B,
Look
okay.
at you.
So smaller Series B, yeah.
Round was led by Peakspan Capital with participation from Ox, reflecting investor confidence in SOC Radar's innovative approach.
So they
go ahead, Adrian.
Looks like they sell to MSSPs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like they're a threat intelligence system, extended threat intelligence. So probably pulling a lot of data out from dark web, stolen credentials, shadow IT, that kind of stuff, and making it presentable. So yeah, good for them for picking that up. Dark web monitoring, free SOC Radar tools. They have a free tool you can download off their webpage or use directly from their services as well.
Very cool. All right, and Cyberark acquired Venafi from Thoma Bravo, which sent me down a rabbit hole that if you're looking at the show notes, you can see. So
it's quite the hole. It's a very, very deep hole. It's a hole bigger than normally the entirety of our notes.
Yes, if Katie fell into said hole, we would not see Katie any longer. She would be gone.
I'm not that short. So, come on.
Thoma Bravo's name comes up all the time. In fact, not too long ago, just last week, we were talking about LogRhythm and Exabeam merging, and we're not quite sure because Thoma Bravo owns LogRhythm, or we think they still own them. We're not sure. They don't have them represented as having exited on their website, so I'm not sure if they still have a majority stake. But because they kept coming up, I decided to go and just kind of take a look at all their portfolio companies and both past and present, and kind of dug through there because some of them are some of the biggest deals that we've seen in the industry.
Yeah, Thoma plays at the deep end of the swimming pool for sure, right? They always have. There's a small selection of vendors that play in that deep end of the pool, and they're one of them. So, they buy big, they sell big. They're large dollars in and large dollars out. High risk, actually not high risk because they're doing it when the company's way more stable.
Right.
But they find the right way to lever it up, or the right company to roll it in with, and then make a bigger play out of it on the other side.
Yeah, and they've done a lot of take privates. In 2022, they took both Ping Identity and SailPoint private. They took Imprivata private back in 2016. They took SonicWall private all the way back in 2010. So they've taken a lot of companies, public companies, private, but more often there's a lot of PE to PE plays here also. Another name that
Mm-hmm.
comes up a lot here is Clearlake Capital and TA Associates. They bought a bunch of companies from Clearlake Capital and TA Associates, and they've sold a bunch of companies to those two PE firms as well.
Yeah, man, it's just assets that you're squeezing, squeezing capital out of, right? And when you think that you've squeezed enough capital out of it, you move it to somebody else, or you IPO it, or if you've grown it enough to get a return on the capital that you put to play, then that's how the game is played. And sometimes companies think that they can squeeze things out of something that somebody else can't do because they have a level of expertise in certain areas that they can bring to
Yeah.
the table. And so they'll hand these assets back and forth as they continue to attempt to monetize those assets longer term for the investors.
Yeah, and they've I forgot about Sophos. They took that private also. That Sophos was public on the London Stock Exchange. That was 3.9 billion. So Sophos and SonicWall at least used to be pretty similar companies, both big UTM vendors back in the day.
Yeah.
And then Proofpoint for 12.3 billion, I think is one of the biggest deals that we've seen in the industry.
Yeah, the other thing to think about too when you're looking at this, Adrian, you don't have it listed on the web page or on our show notes necessarily in chronological order. You have it listed by acquired, acquired and exited, acquired not exited.
Right.
But you can almost
Each
use
of
it
those
as an
should be chronological.
within each one, right? But my point
Yeah.
is, you can almost use it as an indicator of the state of the cyber market when you're
Yeah.
starting to see a lot of P&E acquisitions, and they're starting to pull those companies, taking them private off of the public exchange. It's usually because the market's depressed, they've gotten beaten down, they're not showing necessarily like a massive growth rate that the market wants to see, and so they'll take them private and lever them up, or take them private and find new ways to reinvigorate the executive staff or team and turn it into something bigger, or roll it with a secondary product. So I wish I could see these in a true timeline fashion. Maybe I'll spend the 10 minutes it takes to do that on a spreadsheet. But my gut tells me when the market's super hot, you don't see all the P&E acquisitions. And when the market's down, that's when you see the take privates and acquisitions in occur. You see them going out when the market is overinflated.
Yeah, and
Which
each of
is
these
interesting
does.
because now we're in a weird spot now, because I feel like the market's down, and about to come up, but yet we're seeing some of these things being divested, which is a weird time to be divesting. So, kind of an interesting cross pattern that I'd love to pick a brain smarter than mine with someday.
So that's
Yeah.
interesting
So
that you say that, because watching the market, I agree that the market's down, but I think aside from this week, because it's
Mm-hmm.
post RSA and everybody did their thing a couple of weeks ago, I feel like there's more activity, and the IPO market in particular is starting to get a little
Starting to
louder.
go up. Yeah, it's starting to go up. That's what I mean. I think we're at a relative bottom. I think actually we were lower a little while back, but we're starting to come back up, which to me, that's not the time yet to flip out of the P&E game. It's hold it now, let it climb, and dump it in another year and a half, 2 years when the market's overinflated again. That's why I'm a little bit confused on the activity. But again, I'm not a pro. I'd love to get a true P&E expert in here. So if we have anybody listening who is in private equity in the space and has commentary that can provide there, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear it.
yeah, I mean, there's certainly some roll-ups here. So Ping Identity, SailPoint, ForgeRock happened all in the same year, and they merged ForgeRock with Ping Identity in 2023. So clearly that was and we're seeing some of the same in the SIM market now. So it's interesting to see the PE firms kind of taking the reins on market consolidation there. And then a few of these, so some of these, they'll buy a company, sell the company. Like that
Mm-hmm.
happened with Veracode, for example. Some of these
Yep.
they'll buy a couple companies, squish them together, and then sell them or IPO them or something like that. But some of these they buy them and they'll just hoover up a bunch of smaller companies and feed them in. So Intel 471, ConnectWise are examples of that. ConnectWise, they bought one, two, three, four, five companies to combine into ConnectWise, for example.
Yep. Yep. I was involved in a PE acquisition. I keep saying P&E, but it's a PE acquisition.
That's different.
Yeah, exactly. I was involved in a PE acquisition a while back, and it is a really interesting thing to go through to learn like how they put rigor and control into the companies that get acquired into PE, and how they form a consistent level of oversight into the breadth of companies that they control. So it is fun to watch. And, looking at your acquired, not exited list a little closer, 23, 22, there was a fair amount of take privates and acquisitions in. So that does make sense. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, I might. Yeah, now you've given me an itch to scratch. I might have to throw this into a spreadsheet and graph it so we can see the kind of flow of the deals and years when deals didn't happen. And because I do have both the acquire, the entry, and the exit dates on each of these.
Yeah. And then I would also plot that against NASDAQ growth in the same time. So put your NASDAQ
Now
overlaid on
you're
the
just
same
giving me
graph. It would
work,
be
Tyler.
kind of neat to cross compare. Well, I was
Now
going to
you
do it
just
if you didn't, but I'll leave it to you now. You volunteered, so.
Yeah, I did. So at the bottom of that, Cole Gorolmus, who I've been engaging a lot more with his content lately, he has I think it's a Substack called Strategy of Security. And I think it was a few years ago, he put together a profile on Thoma Bravo, and that actually goes into more details on some of these bigger deals that Thoma Bravo has done. So I've got a link there to that. So if you're somehow still hungry for more details about this Thoma Bravo thing, go check that out. It's a really good write up. He didn't spend too long on each deal, so it reads pretty easy. But
Yeah, good stuff.
yeah, kind of in the same vein, let's shift to number three, which is Ross Haleliuk. And I think this insight came from Bessemer. Bessemer publishes a lot of interesting stuff about
Yeah.
cybersecurity trends. And he made as you heard me say in the intro, the insight that 13 out of 14 cybersecurity companies acquired in the last year for over 100 million were from Israel.
It's a very interesting article, and it goes through it gets into an area that for some that might be a little contentious. It gets into the area of immigration and immigrants and how different countries prepare people for the workforce. I found it absolutely fascinating, and he makes a lot of good points about, in particular, IDF and how it's specifically training people to be entrepreneurs. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a topic that can be a little tricky, especially these days. But the point is that there are certain countries and certain systems that raise their youth to have a different kind of approach to business. And he makes some very good points about Israel, the culture, the
Yeah.
the military, and what that means for incubating startup companies. And because although it seems like there's an endless supply of Israeli cybersecurity startups, it's not that way. It's actually a very small, very tight knit community, and they all, to a certain degree, look out for each other. Yes, of course, there's competition, but there is a little more feeling of a watch each other's backs than maybe there is in other regions. In the U.S., we're sort of raised to be a little more cutthroat when it comes to making our businesses, we're number one, we're going to be the only ones, we're not going to share, we're not going to, we're going to keep our secrets close to the chest. Not saying one's right or wrong, that's up to everybody to decide for themselves, but there are certain things that other cultures are raised for that in this particular arena give them a little bit of an edge. So I thought it was a fascinating read.
Yeah, and I definitely think 8200, that pipeline that they've got is a huge factor. But I wonder, Tyler, if you think that maybe the timing of this, because this is talking about the past year, and we've had some very specific market conditions, or maybe the Israelis less more insulated from those market conditions, and would this be the would this fact be true any other years, or was it particularly because it was a down market, and I don't know, maybe a lot of the other companies didn't like their valuations and didn't want to sell during those conditions? What do you think?
I would I would be careful of overreading into this one. I think there's some telling components in the tea leaves, I guess you could say. Um, Look, if you just took Silicon Valley and you chopped off the rest of the United States, you could probably see similar trends. Although I think to Katie's point, there's certainly some cultural reasons why cybersecurity does very well in Israel. Given just the war prone nature of the region and how people are raised over there and their resiliency, and it's quite impressive actually. I think it's an impressive area for cyber growth. I think at the end of the day, I think there was just an overinvestment in Israel, and I think there's also a function of trickle down happening here. Meaning, Checkpoint was one of the first, if not the first. Correct me if
Hmm.
I'm wrong. Big cyber IPO. Maybe not. McAfee might have been before them. I don't remember, but
Hmm.
Checkpoint
It was
was in the
very
in the
early. Yeah.
90s, and it was super early. And look, if you're part of a community and you're part of something bigger, and one of you hits billions and billions of dollars, you're going to put it to work. I mean, we all have that nature to put it to work. And if you're in Israel, in your region, you're going to put it to work in what you know. And I think it's just a function of the trickle down that's happened over the last 25 to 30 years based on the early cyber exits, of which Bessemer and Blumberg and some of these other early cyber investors in Israel hit it big, and they just keep rolling it right back into the same funds. And the founders roll it right back into the same funds, and the employees roll it right back into the next startups, right? And so it's like compounding interest, right? Israel's cyber entrepreneurship is essentially compounding interest, where it just keeps itself growing over and over. And now it's hit a critical mass where they can be almost self-reliant in the sense that they fund a new cyber startup, it starts to take off, and they've got the network, they've got the introductions, they've got the connections to all the buyers in the US that are willing to get connected with early stage startups. Like, it's all laid out. The blueprint has been
Hmm.
detailed and refined for 2.5 decades, and so it's just becoming this continuous reinforcing loop in Israel that's highly successful.
Yeah, in fact, Nir came out of Checkpoint. That's where one of the places he got his start, and then he went over
Hmm.
to NetScreen, and then NetScreen got acquired by Juniper. Juniper didn't want to build the stuff that he wanted to build, so he left Juniper Networks to start Palo Alto.
So
And you see that kind of pattern over and
yeah,
over.
let me switch it up a little bit and say, if you took the groupings of At Stake, Guardant, Foundstone, all those super early cyber consulting firms from the early 2000s, late 90s, okay, that all went on to found companies or become massive CISOs in the US, and you put them all in San Francisco with no desire to move anywhere else, that would be such a massive reinforcing cybersecurity loop that would have occurred.
Mhm.
Instead, we're distributed all over the US,
Yeah,
literally all over the US, which just lessens the effect, right? It lessens the network effect that occurs.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Especially now, as you say, 2.5 decades in, we can start to see some of these patterns, some of these bigger market trends and patterns. Cybersecurity is still fairly young compared to other fields, but it's interesting to see some of those patterns emerging. Um, see, we've got guards, new AI powered because everything's AI powered now. Cybersecurity and cyber insurance provider, specifically targeting SMBs and their MSP partners. So it's interesting seeing more and more. We were just talking about Sock Radar selling to MSSPs. We're starting to see the market focusing more and more on that 80% of the market that are all smaller companies.
Yeah, I had a pitch. Gosh, it was just this week. I want to say I got a pitch from a new startup that was like, "Hey, here's what we're doing," and Yeah, actually, it was face to face in a coffee shop. Here's what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever level of uniqueness in the product and the market they wanted to serve is fine. But they're like, we want to go down market. We want to serve the mid market buyer. We want to use a PLG motion on the GTM, product led
Mhm.
growth on the go to market engine. Immediately, I told him, well, you're not going to get investment from a VC if you do that, right? Because that's not an investable business most of the time.
Yeah.
Selling high transactional volume 5K, 10K deals is just not the way to grow a business that a VC wants. But I am seeing it more and more. However, if you look at the output of it on the success side, not many, if any, make it through by serving that market, right? There's a very small number that become highly successful by serving that market. So it's going to be neat to watch whether this new crop that think they can tackle the PLG mid market motion are successful, or as has happened in the last 10 years that I've been watching it, the majority of them will eventually switch over to a true enterprise motion after failing at the smaller end.
Yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, some of the PLG folks out there have some funding, but I think in those cases, those are not first-time entrepreneurs, first-time founders.
Correct.
Like yeah, material and trying to think of a few off the top of my head.
But are they doing true PLG? Like true PLG, or are they doing kind of the new age of marketing, which is 100% brand awareness marketing, less lead gen,
Hmm.
which is fine. Like that's just a different marketing coin, right? You're flipping a coin over, and it's a different approach. But how many of them are really sitting there saying, "We'll take a credit card," or "We'll do a 1K deal or a 2K deal"?
Right. Yeah.
Those are
No,
few and
probably
far
not. Yeah.
between. And the ones that will be successful with that are targeting something broader than cyber. And what I mean by that is, like, if you take Sneak, who was, quote, successful with that, they targeted developers and became
Mhm.
successful because there was, what, 100 to 1 developers to cyber people. So the TAM's much larger. They have a much larger audience to PLG against. So I think the ones that would be successful are, hey, anybody that has email needs this product, right? That becomes a different storyline than, hey, we're doing security only, right? So it just depends on what value they bring and how rapidly they can adopt. I definitely am not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's very difficult.
Yeah. All right. So Cisco Hypershield, I've not had time to dig into that. There's been tons of stuff on it. We actually have an executive interview from RSA on it that I have not had a chance to watch yet. I think Matt Alderman did that interview. I don't know if you guys know anything about it. I was hoping Darwin would be here because I'm
Mm.
pretty sure he's dug into it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not
this
entirely
is the
sure what they're doing there.
competition. This is their version of the. I think they're calling it the security data fabric play. This is
Is it
their
a
version
chasm?
of the ish. It's their version of the massive data collection AI overlay model that I've been talking about for a year and a half now, a year plus. It's
Yeah.
the same. It's to compete with Precision AI from Cisco. It's to compete with Sentinel One's. I forget what they call their large data collection platform.
Mm. Yeah, I
It's
forget
to
too.
compete with Zscaler plus Avalor and what they will eventually become. This is Cisco's version of that, from what I can tell.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's what is that platform? Looking at their website right now. Singularity.
Singularity, correct? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think this is Cisco's version of that. But again, I'm not sure. So somebody who's a little more intimate, maybe Alderman can give us a little color on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all called Singularity, but they call it Singularity Data Lake. Let's see. Let's see. So AI abuse. I thought this one was interesting, and this one kind of gets out of cyber a little, but I do think it. I can connect it back to it, where Sam Altman. So for those who don't know, Scarlett Johansson was the voice of an AI in a movie called Her, and he wanted to use her voice for some marketing that OpenAI was doing. So he asked her, and she said no, and he just went and did it anyway. And we're not sure exactly how he did that, if he used a voice actor, like a sound alike actor, or if he just used AI to generate it, which is what you would think he would do, being the CEO of a large AI company. But it does kind of bring up an important precedent here, because I think if he gets away with it, why would why wouldn't everybody do it, right? And then you kind of run into this case where if it's okay to imitate people's likenesses and voice, and there's no lawsuit precedents for that. um, I don't know, that seems like a slippery slope.
This one's a touchy one for me. This one's a
Mhm.
weird one because what if you had an actress whose voice sounded similar? Is she not allowed to use her voice? Can you not hire her? Like, bear with me on that. Like, if my brother picks up my phone, people assume it's me. It sounds just like me, right? We have
Mhm.
close enough voices. There's somebody similar to Scarlett Johansson. Now, I'm not saying that's what he did. He probably AI'd it. You're probably right,
Right.
which brings up a whole other question. But if I got an actress that sounded similar to Scarlett Johansson, and I'd never told anybody it was Scarlett Johansson, their voices just sounded similar, is that acceptable? Like, where do you draw that line of
Yeah.
you're impeding on it, right? And then, okay,
Well,
then you add the AI version of it.
the intent is pretty clear. Like, he does the demo and then tweets just the word "her," sends out a tweet that just says
Ugh.
"her." Like
And there is,
there's
with this one, there is some legal stuff going on. She has come out saying, yeah, this is not okay. Like, this is used. So in this situation, it's pretty clear cut what happened, right? But yeah, it's a tricky situation because impersonation is, in certain cases, an intent to defraud, right? And that gets into a legal thing, and we can certainly tie both privacy and fraud back to cybersecurity. But it's a really it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because yeah, there's also, like, if you're talking about the entertainment industry, stunt doubles, body doubles, stand-ins, they specifically hire people who look.
Yeah.
So it is a very tricky situation. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to get into that part of it, but it is tricky. But what I think it's pretty clear cut that what you cannot do is use someone's likeness without their permission
Correct.
and
I
then
will
market
say,
it as their likeness.
That's the catch. By putting her on Twitter, that's where he
Right.
might have shot himself in the foot. If he never did
yeah,
that, and he can legitimately say, I hired, Jennifer from accounting came over and did the voice. We weren't trying to impersonate her. That's just Jennifer's voice. Right. And then
so
at which point, like, the other catch too is like Las Vegas, a Trump impersonator. Now you get the joke component to it, right? The parody component becomes a piece of
right.
it where you're allowed to do it. But I think it's definitely a gray area. I don't think it's nearly as cut and dry as you just can't make something that sounds like somebody.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's where we needed to have a discussion about it. But relevant to that, I just saw the earlier today the story that there was a political consultant that was behind those fake Joe Biden robocalls, where he told people not to vote, and he now faces a $6 million fine and criminal charges.
Wow.
His name is Stephen Kramer. Faces charges in New Hampshire for orchestrating robocalls with an AI generated voice resembling President Joe Biden, according to Attorney General John Formella. So the FCC is proposing a $6 million fine for Kramer and a $2 million fine for Lingo Telecom over the deceptive robocalls in violation of rules concerning caller ID information.
Mm.
Yeah, and the charges
Caller ID,
are
that seems
charges
like a
of.
weird thing though.
Right. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of weird things they can, interstate commerce and all that stuff. But
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
catching Al Capone on tax evasion. You got to get him somehow.
the charges are felony voter suppression and impersonation. Those are the criminal charges.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this one. Obviously, very different context than trying to suppress votes.
Yeah, at this point, we're just waiting for. I'm working on it as we speak, Adrian. I'm making an Adrian bot, It's coming soon. It's going to sound just like you. So just be prepared and be ready. It's coming.
I'll be prepared. I'll ring up my lawyer. Continuing with the cheerful news, tech giants pledge AI safety commitments, including a kill switch if they can't mitigate risks. Fun one. That was story number 8. I haven't dug in too deep into that, so I don't have a whole lot to say about that. I think it's just interesting noting that milestone. And the next one, number 9, a third of CISOs have been dismissed out of hand by the board. So this is a survey. The research comes from a survey, as you'd imagine. But I think it brings up an old conversation where CISOs have had a kind of a hard time, breaking into the executive suite, being taken seriously, or even being close to it. Like a lot of we've known, I think all of us have known people with the title of CISO, at the director level or something like that.
Yeah, it's a notoriously difficult area to break into. And for all the CISOs out there, maybe you don't want to.
Yeah.
Just think about that
I,
too, right? Like, do you really want to? Be careful what you wish for.
I just had lunch with a good friend who's in between gigs, and he's moving from CISO at a public company to CISO at a private company. And it sounded like you dropped a golf ball, Katie.
It was my ear
So
thingy.
it's a loud earbud.
Well, it fell onto the desk, so it was a hard plastic thing falling onto a wood thing. Sorry, continue, please.
So what
But
what
yeah,
did what did your buddy say at lunch?
so part of what made him leave, being a CISO at a public company was, you don't get to do the fun stuff anymore. There's just a lot of regulatory crap that he has to deal with. That's just not enjoyable. It's not what he got into it for. But the other side of it is, the concerns about personal liability, about having to protect himself personally, from, potentially, you know, criminal charges. We've seen all kinds of stuff happening in. I mean, not a ton of it, with Uber and with SolarWinds, but that it's enough to kind of chill that market and make people not want to be CISOs of public companies.
Yeah. The other interesting thing I noticed in this report, it's in the not I didn't read the report itself in detail, but I did read the news article that covers it, and it says some 80% of respondents to the survey claim that the board would only be incentivized to act decisively on business risk if a breach occurred, and they
Yeah.
estimate that on average, a financial loss of 150,000 British pounds would be enough to nudge the C suite into actually doing something. So basically, what that's saying is 80% of the people that they interviewed said if a breach under 150K occurs, no change. They just write it off as an oops, as a loss.
Yep.
It's
Well, it depends
incredible.
on the size of the company too. I mean, for some companies, $15 million gets
Yeah,
written off, right? I
yeah,
mean, if the insurance covers it, also, it's not even going to hit the books, right?
that's true. Well, it'll hit the books and then be reimbursed, but yeah.
Right. Um, so there's this other newsletter I've been following. If you are into generative AI and you want to keep up with it, last week in GAI, security research is an interesting newsletter to follow. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. Like we continue seeing purpose-built LLMs being trained. One of these academic papers focuses on an LLM that can find steganography in things. It's really good at finding stego and using LLMs to find particular types of DDoS attacks, types of spam, even finding cyber activity news. So just pulling interesting news stories out. So a bunch of interesting stuff in there. I'll never have time to read them all, but if you want to dig into some of that research, that's a really good newsletter. And he does do some summaries of the different things in the newsletter if you don't have time to read everything, like me.
Have you followed any of the new revisions of ChatGPT that have come out? Last week, I think, I forget what they call it, 4.0,
4.0, 4.0,
4.0,
yeah.
yeah. And then they're all already teasing
O
a
means omni, I
massive leap.
think.
Yeah.
Yep, and they're already teasing a massive jump forward with 5. They're saying 5 is going to be night and day better than 4 and 4.0. So there's still some advancement happening really quickly in that space.
I hate the demos. The well, the demos of the conversational. So that's one of the things they wanted to do with 4.0 is to get it fast enough to where it can be conversational. But the like the flirty sound of the voice and the giggles like before responding and like they're trying to make it sound human. Don't do that. Let it be a robot. Just let it be a robot. It's just it's cringy. And some of the demos just having it sing things and sing in harmony, like the hell do I care about that for? Like show it doing useful things. Show it saving people time. Like the translation, like two-way translation feature. I mean, that's the kind of demos I want to see. Like that's, I mean, that will transform
Real
travel,
time.
and connections between cultures. Like a real world, yeah, us nerds who read books know the Babelfish from the Hitchhiker's
Mm-hmm.
Guide to the Galaxy, and we have it now. It
Yeah.
exists.
But here's the thing. As technologists, you're more likely to accept a robot being a robot. The whole premise behind AI for most of the world is sentience. And so putting that because this isn't true AI, because it doesn't have true sentience. No, not yet. Don't raise your eyebrows at me, Tyler Shields.
It's not general AI. Yeah.
It's not this, and it's not sentient, right? And so they're trying to put things into it, even if it sounds and feels a little cringy, that they think for now they're at least testing out how it makes people, quote, feel. As a technologist, Adrian, you're perfectly comfortable.
I got some feedback.
Right,
It's not just
but
me.
right, but and the tech community is perfectly comfortable with a robot. Would you like to play a game? Great, fine. It's what we've been interacting with for decades. Whereas the rest of the
What?
world wants it perhaps to feel a little more human. And I don't think the tech or the tech savvy community is nearly as concerned with that, and so it might feel a little more ick to people who are more comfortable with that barrier.
It's not just a tone. Like it'll throw in just an extra sentence of just like small talk and stuff like that, or
you haven't ever
like
known people who throw in extra small talk and you feel cringy in person?
But if I want to know what the weather is, I don't want to have to sit through that. Like why take 15 seconds to give me a 2-second answer?
No,
That's just
I get
irritating.
it, but you've never had that in person?
It's
Well,
not. I don't think
yeah,
it's the
that's
tone,
why I
Adrian.
don't want it from a robot.
I don't think it's the tone, Adrian. I think it's the speed, and this is what I mean by that. If you're hearing,
Right. I think it's saving time.
But if I say, hey, tell me the
It-
weather, and it
yeah.
gives me the weather, the time, the weather for next week, the weather in California, if it's laggy at all and slow to respond, that's super painful. If you could
Yeah.
interrupt it in real time and say, hey, never mind, and it stopped instantly without any lag,
You
it
can.
probably
Yeah, and you
wouldn't
can with
bother you
this.
so much, right? And so as
Yeah.
we're getting to that faster
And
nuances of it, I think you're going to feel it be less cringy because
in
of the ability to speak in a human tone to you.
in fact, if you watch the demos, there's not a single demo where they don't interrupt the voice
Right.
because because it's just going to talk on and on. And so almost every single demo, they're constantly interrupting it.
So this is yet another massive difference between AI and real life. If you do that to people in real life, you won't be doing that
Katie,
to a lot of people.
Stop, Katie.
Right. You won't have a lot of friends and colleagues who want to talk to you if every time you're like, stop, not interested in that. But the number of times per day you might want to say that or like, stop.
I could give you a long list of people that interrupt people all the time. Tyler.
I do not, liar. I only interrupt Katie and you. That's all.
And whomever else might be on this podcast in the future.
That's true.
Because we're talking too much and we need to shut up. It's fine.
Exactly. That's
All right, so we've got a dumpster fire here, and I'm sounding like a broken record again. I haven't had. It's been a busy week. I'm putting on a 400 plus person conference, so I haven't had time to read all the way into this. But another great piece from the 404 Media Group, 404media.co. Jason Kobler over there. University suspends students for AI tool it gave them a $10,000 prize to make. So this just sounds like classic, university looking for, they want to have that messaging. Oh, look at what our students are doing with AI. Not understanding AI, not understanding what the students built, and then knee-jerk reaction, suspend the students once they realize what the tool actually does. When the students never hid what the tool did. It is all on the university, for not looking closely enough at it, not taking the time to understand what these kids were doing, and it's. I mean, this happens every time we see new technology with universities. Like, they just have a hard time moving at the same speed, that technology is moving.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. They basically made a tool that could help you study. You feed it all of your class notes, all of your tests, all of your quizzes that you've taken, and it
And they're
helps
calling
you
it cheating,
study.
right?
Well, apparently that's what won them the 10 grand, but then the students and the school installed it on top of basically the
Canvas.
collection of class data on top of Canvas, right, for all of the students to use, which then essentially took all of the data and it made what did we all used to use when we were in middle school and high school 100 years ago? You had to read a summary reading and you read just the cliff notes. You read the cliff
Cliff
notes.
Yeah.
notes. Yes.
Essentially, that's what they're doing, right? They're making an automated version of
And
here's the
what's
5
wrong
things
with
you're going to
that?
need to know to get an A.
Right.
Nothing's wrong with that. But to roll it out globally across your entire class seems a little bit, I don't know, seems like a little bit of a
That's what the
step too
tool is
far.
designed to do. That's
So
Yeah,
I
why
I
they
have
made
mean,
it.
I have a couple of questions here. So they designed the tool. It was a competition. The school wanted the research, the school wanted the marketing, the school wanted the publicity, and the school wanted the donations from alumni. Okay, so that's the stage we're setting. The students
Yep.
did what they were asked to do. Presumably, there was at least some period in which a professor had an opportunity to say, we need to tweak, we need to stop, keep going, whatever. And then at some level, the students would have needed some sort of permission to roll out this tool upon completion in the way that it happened. So, because you can't just, as a student, I mean, again, going back 1,000 years when I was in school, you can't just roll out something campus wide without anybody's permission. And my guess is these students did not, in fact, hack the computer, database
uh-uh.
or whatever and put it on there unilaterally. This was not their
Yeah,
decision solely. They were not given permission to do whatever the hell they wanted. And so somebody got caught with their pants down because they didn't vet it correctly. They didn't understand the implications. And some donor probably heard it from their kid on campus. And that's what happened. So it was a complete cluster because there was no oversight, exactly the kind of argument that a lot of people have been talking about with AI. In this case, is it that bad? I don't know. But that's not the point. The point was that there was no oversight. They said, go do this, see what you can do, push boundaries. Hey, that's what a college education is for, right? Push your boundaries, think, use your intelligence, your creativity to the limits. And then they went, oh, we didn't actually mean to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go
I
Too
don't
there.
think these
creative.
kids,
Stop.
for what it's worth, I don't think the kids did anything wrong either. It's also interesting further on when you read through the rest of the article. The students' lawyers wrote that the university changed the settings within Canvas and hid the button that generates Canvas API tokens, so that this could no longer work. And then the students shut 8 Ball is the name of the product, shut it down at this point. So it's not like they were trying to do anything nefarious. In the long run, I don't think this was cheating. I think this was like a smart way of studying. Because look at it this way: I do product marketing. I created a Chat GPT bot. I fed it with all of our writing, all of our product marketing materials to date, and I use it to make product marketing content constantly because it's faster and better, and it can just bang it out quickly. Does that mean I'm not doing my job, or am I just being more efficient? So
You
these
are just
students
being
were
more
finding
efficient.
ways to be more efficient when it comes to education and learning. Now, I do think it is a system that I would not necessarily recommend using. So I'm a professor at a university who uses Canvas, and
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend my students to necessarily use it because it'll give them a shortcut to the answer and not help them learn the process. But does that make that cheating? No, I wouldn't say it makes it cheating. I would just say makes it more efficient at finding the answers that you're looking for. You just don't learn how to get there, and that I think is what scared the school.
Sure, and that
Yeah.
is the reason for a college education. College education isn't necessarily about learning a thing, it's about learning how to think. It's about learning process. It's about learning how to learn. I agree with that totally. But I think once again, it comes back to governance and oversight 100% of the time. Don't give people carte blanche permission to use anything and then go, oh, you abused it. You can't do
Yeah,
that.
there's additional things in this story too. It gets weirder and weirder as you read through it. By the way, some students were actually in trouble for giving access to Canvas because they said
Right.
by generating API tokens and then using that token in the 8-ball software, you've given a third party access to your account, which is against password sharing policy, which I find to be pure garbage as well. Um,
Let's just read through, the student EULA and let's find
yeah,
something to,
well, it
to
gets even
pin on
further
them.
because
Is
then
how that feels. Yeah.
after they hid the API token creation feature, and some group of students found a workaround and were able to generate tokens regardless, meaning there was a bug in Canvas that they exploited. So then they got in trouble for actually exploiting an IT security measure on top of it. So this thing just spiraled out of
Well, they're
control.
probably
It's
just using
ridiculous.
JavaScript like you can probably
Yeah,
just
they're doing something
go
like that.
go
Yeah,
into the dev tools and make it reappear
sure.
again or so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
probably.
good for them for finding workarounds. I mean, that's creativity. I'm not
Somebody's
saying
gonna
do
hire
things
them. Those are
right.
skills.
Exactly. Exactly.
Lawsuit
Yep.
is still pending. We can wrap on that for this particular story. Lawsuit is still pending. The attorneys declined to comment, and Emory University also declined to comment for the story.
Yeah, so something happened very early in my career that kind of parallels this, but at work. 2 weeks into what I consider my first career job. It was my first salary job working for a large payment processor. I was on the IT side. I wasn't in security yet. I spent 4 years in IT before I moved over into InfoSec, and we got hit with it wasn't Code Red, it was NIMDA, I think.
NIMDA.
And we had IIS servers everywhere. They were infected, and they wanted me to go find all the infected systems and clean them manually. And I think they expected me to physically go in a server room and log into each server from a keyboard, from a KVM, and do that removal. But I decided to do a port scan. And so most of the people in IT didn't know what a port scan was in June of 2021. So I walked around and told them, "Hey, it's going to be a lot faster to find all these infected systems. I'm going to do a port scan to see where
Two
IIS is installed."
thousand one, not
2001.
2021.
Yeah. If
2001.
they don't know what a port scan is in 2021, they're a little
Yeah,
behind the
yeah,
times.
that's
You
that's a
meant
problem.
2001.
Did I say 2001 or two?
You said 2021.
Yeah, June 2001. Yeah,
100 years ago, Adrian. That's all we need to
a
know.
hundred
When you
years
were a
ago,
kid, 100 years
It's
ago.
at
just after
least
Y2K.
right,
Yeah, exactly.
at least 50 years ago.
But you
Yeah.
got in trouble for port scanning.
Yeah, so everybody's like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. I run the port scan, and it sets off some alarms on the Solaris Unix admin systems because it touches port 22 SSH, and he freaks out. He demands for me to be fired and wants me to be. Yeah, 2 weeks into my job, like I'm so stoked to have gotten this job, And of course my manager stood up for me and said, no, it was just being more efficient at getting the job done. And
That's right.
and cooler heads prevailed, but it was a pretty scary moment. Like I thought I was doing good by automating the process, by making it quicker to solve the problem, but you know they really reminded me of this situation.
Those damn hacker tools, Nmap, man, you got to stay away from those.
It was Advanced Administrative Tools was the name of the software. uh,
Oh, fancy.
AAT, AA Tools, I think they called it for short. And I had purchased it myself. It was my own personal license.
So you brought a hacker tool to
So you
work on top.
I
clearly
did.
were
Oh,
violating policy.
I
Yeah.
would have fired you in a heartbeat.
Somebody else would have hired me. Um, all right, let's wrap up here. So there's a fun article from Kelly Shortridge, tutorial on doing some chaos engineering, focused on security. So that's a great read. She's got sample JavaScript in there. Walks you through some examples. No excuse not to get into this. Um, there's a great postmortem from the DFIR report, which is another great newsletter that kind of summarizes either postmortems of breaches, or what we know about different attacker profiles and the different techniques they use, different malware. So that's a really good read, and in fact, that's from Casey Smith over at Thinkst. So he puts a Thinkst spin on it and talks about, okay, here's the different techniques, and here's how you use canary tokens and canaries to put detection triggers on those different techniques. Here's how you know when the attacker actually does it. And then another essay from Thinkst, that while I was there, I saw this other one. I thought it was cool. They talk about creating I found out a product glorifier is a term. When you have a physical product, like if you go to Target or something like that and you see this backlit stand with the product sitting on it, that's called a product glorifier.
Hmm.
And they're wanting to make something like that because Thinkst sells physical canaries. So because they have a physical product, they want to display it at their booth at RSA, at Black Hat, at the different conferences they go to. And it's a really fun journey through all the different prototypes. They tried to hire a company to make a product glorifier for them. They ended up just 3D printing their own, and they go through the whole process because they want to integrate buttons into it so they can physically turn the canaries on and off. So it's a fun read, and I think it's a good lesson. Like a lot of people want to understand Think's success, having raised no money, been very successful, over 2,000 customers, like 16 million in ARR now, with like 40 people, almost all of whom are in South Africa. Yeah, and this is just an example of that. Like they take these little things, they try and make them delightful. They try and if it's worth doing right, is kind of the thinking here. Um, and then the squirrel story here to wrap things up. I don't know if you guys have seen any of these ads yet, but Matthew McConaughey did some ads for Salesforce on AI, and I think it's kind of brilliant. They're getting ahead of everyone being concerned about what happens to their data in AI tools. I've had dozens and dozens of these conversations with companies, and it's true. Their first concern is what happens to my data when it goes into this AI.
It is classic.
They're good.
And
Like
it's
like
not
some,
just one of them. There's like 8 of them, right? 7
yeah,
of
there's
them?
like seven of them. I think some of them are derivative. So some of them are like 10-second versions of 30-second ones. So maybe
Mm.
maybe there's 4 or 5 total. But some of them are really creative, where they actually use intentionally bad AI generated images and video that have like these weird artifacts. So there's one where uh, Matthew McConaughey is walking away from the camera, and it's like glitching where like his cowboy boots are facing the camera, but he's walking away, and it like yeah, it's interesting. Like they did some artistically creative stuff with the ads, and a lot of them get right to the point too. Um, some of them have like 7 words, like he says 7 words, and it's basically like we're not going to train on your data, we're not going to use it for anything, we're not going to sell it. That you've got nothing to worry about when you're using Salesforce AI is basically the tagline
Who
here.
did the other one? Who did the other Wild Wild West ad recently in cybersecurity? I want to say maybe for the Super Bowl, I think it was. Was it CrowdStrike?
I
CrowdStrike.
know which one.
Yeah, that
CrowdStrike.
one was bad. I didn't like that one. This one I liked, and it's just subtle differences in that one. And I guess cyber is becoming more mainstream. Just at RSA, Palo Alto used Keanu
Keanu
Reeves as their
Reeves, your
front man
favorite
for the
actor.
precision AI ads. The worst actor in Hollywood. They used him for their precision AI ads. So
So do you approve of Matthew McConaughey
I
more
do.
in this one?
I saw this. I was like, that's pretty damn good, creative, funny. Like it worked. It worked. And I
Yeah.
thought, no way. Like when somebody told me what had happened, like this is going to be a bomb, just like the CrowdStrike one. But it worked. I was pretty impressed.
No, I think they're getting ahead of it, and they're all their competitors out there. A ton of companies are like, okay, AI, we're going to need all the data, and we're going to need to use it for everything. We need to change our EULAs, so that we're allowed to use everything. And what happens? Like some of these services, what was the service where everybody just started deleting all their stuff because they didn't want AI being trained on it? That story was a couple of weeks ago, but everybody started, and they had to actually lock people's posts because they were going in and deleting everything because they
Hmm.
did not want the company profiting off of their posts. So yeah, that's a very negative response we're seeing from all that data we've collected on you. We're going to start profiting off it. People didn't like that.
Conceptually, it's yeah.
So it's pretty smart for Salesforce to do this, and I'm kind of curious if others will follow suit with that. But yeah, I think the knee-jerk response was, okay, we're going to take all the data, we're going to make a lot of money off this. As soon as they saw Reddit get, what was it, $60 million from one
Yeah.
AI company to access their data, a lot of companies saw dollar signs after that happened.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're sitting on a gold mine. Oh, that's the one ad. Um, shoot, I forget what he says. He says if AI is the new Wild West, is data the new gold? And that's it. That's the whole ad, and it's just like gets you thinking, right?
Well, here's the problem though.
Um,
So, yeah, I know we're talking about AI, which is slightly different than just plain old data, but companies have been using our data and mining it and creating campaigns from it and doing internal analysis of it and monetizing it for 2 decades now. Why don't people realize this? It's just happening faster
Right.
now. Why why
No,
why is
I don't
this
think it's
new?
that. I think it's because their data is coming back out at them, and like the person
It
sitting next to
always
them.
has. Have you ever shopped on Target, Home Depot? Like, come on, it's been happening. It's just happening at a larger scale and a lot faster now.
Yeah, but not their creative works. It's like the person next to me is generating a creative work that was
Well,
made
that's true.
possible by training on my creative work. So it
Larger scale
feels
and
different.
faster. Larger scale and
Emotionally, it
faster.
feels
That
different.
emotionally, it feels different to people who aren't
It
tech
feels like
dorks.
theft.
It feels
I
like theft, but it's the same premise, only larger and faster. And yeah, more
I'm
personal.
going to sue. I'm going to sue Salesforce on behalf of Enterprise Security Weekly because they have a video called Self Aware Squirrel where they're specifically talking about who's going to become self aware first, us or them. And it's a self aware robotic squirrel. And hey, we invented squirrel stories. They stole that from us.
Did you
That's
just
all I'm
paint a
saying.
target on our back and call out
That's all I'm saying,
Salesforce?
SFDC. SFDC, you don't want to sponsor us? I think you should sponsor us. We'll withdraw the lawsuit.
I
Just saying.
Are you
think they have
extorting Salesforce on our
I think they
podcast?
have bigger,
No,
badder
I would
lawyers
never.
than I have.
Tyler, you got to run this by me first.
Go watch the video. It's video
Here
number
goes
7 on
here
the
goes the
playlist.
podcast.
It's called Self Aware Squirrel Ask More of AI.
So, Adrian,
Go
before
watch it.
you said of your first job, you would get hired by someone else. Tyler may never get hired in the industry again. So it's okay.
All right.
I'm working on that.
Thanks so much, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today on the final episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We're going to get sued. We'll be gone by next week. Thanks everybody who watched or listened to this final episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
We'll miss you.
We'll miss you. We might see you next week. We
love you.
We might not. Yeah, check back in to see if we're still here next week.
We're not.
Bye.
We won't be. Goodbye.